Hey everybody, welcome to the Smell Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Boateng. This week, I'm excited to share with you all an interview with Chris Kelly. She created and runs the website Smell Training, which you can find online at www.smelltraining.co.uk. If you haven't tried Smell Training before, definitely go and check it out. She has great resources in addition to information about what smell training is and how to do it. Okay, let's jump straight into the interview. So hi, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on the Smell Podcast. I'm really excited to have you on today.
Thank you.
And then today I wanted to talk with you about what you do. But first off, can we learn a little bit about you? So can you tell us about yourself? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Maine, in a small town called Brunswick. And I had a perfectly good sense of smell when I was a child. In fact, I have many, many very accurate smell memories of that time of my life, from being sort of my earliest memories, up until until I lost my sense of smell, but particularly acute memory for smells when I was a child.
Awesome.
I grew up in Maine, and then I went off to college, and I eventually moved from New York City to Austria, where I lived for a couple of years, and then I moved to France, and then eventually I settled here in the UK, and that was about almost 30 years ago now.
That's so exciting. What brought you to the United Kingdom?
I was married. My husband got a job. He was transferred from where he was working in France to the UK, so we packed up and moved when he got the new job.
That's pretty exciting. I was actually born in the UK at Lakenheath Air Force Base, but we moved when I was little, so I never had an accent.
Oh, right.
Awesome. So can you tell us, what is your smell or taste disorder story? So how did you get involved with it?
Okay. Well, this was 6 years ago. I had a really bad sinus infection. I felt really unwell. And even though I'd had plenty of colds and, sinus infections before in my life, I wasn't one of those people who had actually lost their sense of smell as a result of that temporarily. But with this particular case was maybe worse than the other ones. And one morning I woke up and I had absolutely no sense of smell. And that was quite a shock to me. I noticed immediately. So I noticed it when I went into the bathroom first thing in the morning and went to brush my teeth, and I thought, I can't smell the toothpaste. And so I made a quick trip around the bathroom trying to smell everything that was there, and could not smell anything, which I found very alarming. But I thought, I'll wait a few days and see if it passes, because I knew it was possible to sort of lose your sense of smell temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
I then went to the doctor, and she was not particularly helpful. She said, I don't think there's anything we can do for you. And after about 6 weeks, I went back to the doctor and asked for a referral to an ENT surgeon. That ENT surgeon was not very hopeful. He scoped my nose and said, I see nothing wrong with you, but I'll give you a course of steroids, which I took for a week. And he said, if these don't work, then there's nothing I can do for you, so you'll just have to kind of live with it. Mm-hmm. So by this time, I was getting more and more anxious about having lost my sense of smell. I found it very, very difficult to live that way. And I eventually went onto the internet and found that there was one ENT surgeon in the UK who was specializing in this. And I made an appointment to go and see him. And he he scoped my nose. He gave me a sniff and sticks smell test, which tests identification, threshold, and discrimination. Mm-hmm. Which was it takes about an hour to do that. So it's quite a complex test, comprehensive. And I scored completely anosmic on that test. He asked me to come back 3 months later, which I did. And when I went back, I was edging into the hyposmic category. And I remember what an exciting thing that was, because at the second appointment, after 3 months, I had the same sniff and sticks test. And when the technician sort of gave me all these different things, they look a bit like felt tip pens, when she let me smell these things or presented them to me so that I could smell them. I remember being very excited because I could actually smell something,
Yeah.
which I hadn't really realized. When I went in, I thought, oh, my sense of smell is still really terrible. But then when I was being tested and I was realizing that I could smell something, I just got very excited about that. And I went back to the ENT, and he said, right, well, this looks a little bit better than last time. I think you would be a good candidate for smell training. And so I was putting on my coat by this time, and I said, well, what does that mean? And he said, oh, well, you just get 4 essential oils and you smell them twice a day. So I thought that sounded like okay, that sounded like some instructions, but it didn't sound like enough information for me to get started. And so I remember sitting in the train going home from that appointment and thinking to myself, well, if I'm going to do this, how can I do it so that I know that whether or not it's working?
Mm-hmm.
How can I make it kind of more meaningful? What does it really mean to smell train? I sort of was just sort of thinking about what I realize now is thinking to how I could make a smell training program.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing it, and I started keeping a diary. I tried to, the first day that I started, I tried to kind of write down everything that I could about the experiences I was having, because I wanted to be sure that, in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, I wanted to know whether there had been any change. And I think when you are that as desperate as I was at that time, that's what you're hoping for, that thin ray of light that says, actually, something's happening. My ENT had explained to me, and of course, by this time I'd been on the internet, and I had been looking for support groups and Facebook and things like that. And I knew that, it took a long time. It was sometimes very slow if you were to get any recovery. So I was aware of that, but I wanted to kind of grab onto that and pin down any improvement that I had. So this went on for about 6 months, and I started, and I thought, yes, I do notice things are changing. And then I started to kind of set tests for myself or challenges. And for instance, I thought to myself, well, I sort of can smell what lemon smells like now. And I got some other essential oils. So I got grapefruit, orange, and mandarin. And I thought, I wonder if I can learn how to differentiate these 4 smells blindfolded. So that's an example of the kind of more complex task I set for myself. And sure enough, I was able to do it. It takes practice. But I then went on to do a perfumer's course, and found that the things that I was learning, that I was discovering myself, are actually techniques that are used by perfumers when they train their noses. So that also excited me, and I thought, that's really interesting. I mean, perfumers are starting when they begin their study to become a nose. They start out like any other person with an untrained nose. And what are the techniques that they use to make their noses able to detect fine differences in smells? And so time went on. I kind of got more and more interested in the subject. I read more and more. I was able to get in touch with Professor Thomas Hummel, who is the man who wrote the original research paper on smell training. I met him. I've attended now 3 of his courses, and I just find the topic as fascinating. For me, I just found it more interesting and rewarding to be a student of my condition rather than a kind of victim. And so, it's become a major interest in my life. After about a year, actually a year and a half, 2 years, I decided that maybe what I should do is take all the knowledge that I had acquired about smell training, about my own experience from the people that I'd spoken to, and maybe I should set up a website.
Yeah. That's what kind of
And
brought me to find you online, is your smell training website.
yeah, I originally, I mean, my motivation then, as now, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about what I'm doing in the future. But my motivation then was to provide for other people the very thing that I felt I didn't have access to when I lost my sense of smell. And that is a place where you can go for all the best information in one place. There is a lot of misinformation on the internet. There are, if you go into any of the Facebook groups, there are people who want to recommend therapies or drugs or things that, that might not be appropriate, that haven't been tested, that haven't, that are not just, I think that some of the information out there is not very high quality. And
Right.
so I wanted to provide a place where people could read peer-reviewed scientific papers that discussed the latest in, therapeutic techniques or what was understood about smell disorders. And so that's what my website became. I then started a Facebook group. So we now have, I think, 750 people.
Wow.
In that group who have found their way to me the way you did. And in the group, we discuss all kinds of subjects. Sometimes I put topics up. Sometimes people respond with their stories or ask questions. But what was clear to me as I began to watch the discussion in the Facebook group was that together as a group, we have a huge, a vast quantity of experience that the researchers and the doctors don't necessarily know about. Mm-hmm. So if you're lucky, you might get one or two chances to sit in front of an ENT surgeon and tell him or her what your story is. Now, and if you're not so lucky, you might get in front of a GP who has 10 minutes to speak to you, or maybe a little bit more than that, but they don't have time to take an accurate history and then compare your history to 750 other people. So what I began to realize is that together we have this collective experience which might help researchers understand more about what the long-term outcomes are for patients like myself and patients like you and all the other people in the group.
With that in mind, can you explain a little bit more about what smell training is exactly, and how do you think it works, or how does it work?
Okay. Smell training is either it's very simple to explain, and I can explain it to you in 30 seconds, or it's much more complicated depending on how deep you want to go into the subject. In its simplest form, smell training is the smelling of 4 different essential oils twice a day for about 20 seconds per oil. The original paper, written in 2009, recommended the use of lemon, rose, clove, and eucalyptus. There was nothing magic about this combination, except that Professor Hummel wanted to choose something that was floral, spicy, resinous, and fruity. So he chose these sort of at random, and because of the nature of scientific research, those 4 essential oils have been reproduced in almost every study, so they get used over and over again. So a lot of people ask me, is it important that I use those 4? And I always say, no, actually it's up to you. If you don't like the smell of eucalyptus or you find rose too expensive, which it is, it's a very expensive essential oil, then choose something else. And if you have an essential oil that you are particularly fond of, that you really loved before you lost your sense of smell, use that. So you've got these 4 essential oils, and I recommend to people that they keep them in jars, especially for people who are starting out. I find these little jars, which I use when I'm giving a workshop, or when I tell people how to make a kit. I recommend little jars. They're 2 ounces or 30 milliliter. And they're just little tiny things. They're made of brown glass, so they don't let the light in. And then inside the jar, I put an absorbent disc of paper. So I use watercolor paper, cut to the right size, drop that in the bottom, and then I add drops of essential oil to that. What's the beauty of using the jars is that there's when you take the lid off, the air inside the jar is really smelly. And if you're just starting out, you want to know that the place where you're putting your nose, right up close to the jar, is as smelly as it's going to get. I think that when people try and smell train directly from the bottle, they're so kind of greedy to see if they can find a smell that they often end up touching their nose to the dropper end of the bottle. And that's not good, because some of these essential oils can be a little bit harsh on the skin. Mm-hmm. So I prefer people to use them in jars. They can get quite close to the jar. The air inside is really smelly, and also it protects. You take the rest of the essential oil and keep it in the refrigerator, where it will be better preserved than if it was just hanging around on your desk or something where the light was getting to it. So that's the easy explanation of what smell training is.
As far as your journey with smell training, did you start off completely anosmic? And
yes.
After your loss, and then how would you rate your sense of smell now?
Well, I will always have some degree of parosmia. So there are certain smells for me that will always be altered. But there are plenty of smells that are not altered. And also, I think with time, it's been 6 years, I think your brain kind of fills in the blanks after a while. I feel that my quality of life has been restored. And if anything, I have a greater appreciation for my sense of smell now. And it gives me great joy and great satisfaction, although it is reduced without doubt. So as I said, there is some distortion still. And I would say that the level of my smell acuity, in other words, my ability to appreciate a smell is reduced probably by about half. Yeah. Having said that, I have fantastic threshold. I score as high as you can get with the sniff and sticks test on threshold. But I think that's just a question of training. A normal person would never have such a high score. And I think that is just a result of smell training every day.
So I guess you still have parosmia, but beforehand when you were completely anosmic, what was it like for you explaining what was going on to other people?
Well, it's very difficult. It's practically impossible, I think, to explain to other people what it's like, how odd, how peculiar the world feels, how two-dimensional it feels when you don't have a sense of smell. And I just sort of ran out of ways to describe it and got fed up of trying to explain to people just how awful it was. And of course, as you say, it's an invisible disability. And you do find, if you want to go down that road of explaining to people why you're eating or not eating something, it gets sort of tedious. And so the temptation is to just pretend that it's not a problem.
Right.
I remember I felt there was a time when it was very awkward for me if we were in a restaurant or we'd gone to someone's house for dinner, and they would say, people would be talking about how wonderful the dinner was or anything, and I never really knew what to say that didn't feel like a complete lie. And I remember being somewhere talking to other people, and a woman said to me, I just say to the cook, thank you for taking so much trouble over the meal, or thank you for the beautiful preparation, or something that said something appreciative about the meal that didn't necessarily have to do with its flavor.
Right.
And I thought that was kind of a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I've been in those situations before where someone will hold out something to you. Maybe they don't know, or they can't remember that you can't smell. And that's always really awkward when you have to remind them that you can't smell.
Yeah.
So I've been there So on your site, you do smell training consultations, which I think is awesome. And I've saw that you have a few like events that you do with people around your area and even a few that were here in the United States.
Hmm.
So what do the smell consultations, the training consultations involve? And how can someone who is interested in that get in touch with you to make an appointment?
People can make an appointment to have a Skype consultation with me just through my website. So it's just smelltraining.co.uk /book book an event. No, gosh, isn't that terrible? I don't even know.
That's okay.
Isn't that terrible? I apologize. But yes, it's very clear. If you go to the browser bar at the top, you can see where you can book a session with. Book a session is what it's called. And there are a lot of people out there who've never been able to find a doctor or find anyone that really understood, what their problem is. And those are the people who live in rural areas or feel misunderstood by their doctors who come to me, and I always start by asking them to tell me their story, a bit like you've done here. And I help them understand, for instance, the difference between taste and smell, because there's a lot of misunderstanding there. Patients will also often go to their doctors and say, I can't taste my food. We know that that's the use of the word taste is colloquial, so it doesn't really, people think that because taste is something happens in the mouth, it has to do with the tongue. So there's a problem there with the nomenclature. And so I try and explain to them how losing your sense of smell affects the way you perceive the flavor of your food. And, because you chew in your mouth, you think of the flavor as being in your mouth, but actually the most important component is in your nose. And so I explain that to them. We talk about what they're able to smell and not smell. There are some interesting patterns in that I've found talking to people. So, which I won't go into detail here, but certainly the way certain foods can be very distorted after acquired smell loss, and those are the people who have had post-infectious smell loss, and sometimes people who've had head injuries. So we talk a little bit about that and exactly where they are in the process of losing their sense of smell and recovering. I always tell people, and I have an article about this on my website. People want to know whether or not smell training would be any good for them. And that's a question that is difficult. That's a question that everyone has to answer for themselves. And I have a kind of a little quiz you can take by looking at the blog on the website to help people understand whether or not they might benefit from smell training. So I do recommend that, because it may not help everyone, but there is research going on right now. In fact, I just heard a doctor who treats TBI patients. So these are patients with a head injury. And I heard him speak at the most recent course that was organized by Professor Hummel. And he says when the patients who have head injuries come into the hospital, he questions them immediately about their sense of smell and has them start smell training immediately.
Wow.
So there is some evidence to show that smell training is good for TBI patients as much as it is for post-infectious patients. So when I was first given smell training, the idea, it had only been tested on patients with post-infectious smell loss. And so the general line of thought was that it should really only be recommended to post-infectious patients. They're really the only ones that could benefit. But this is turning out not to be the case. So it would appear that TBI patients take longer to recover. But and he was very interesting. There were other ENTs in the audience, and they asked, how on earth do you keep your patients motivated to keep smell training even years after their smell loss? And he said, I contact them every 3 months. And I say to them, how's it going? And you really should continue with the smell training. And he's had some amazing results with patients who in spite of, against all odds, continued to smell train. And then 3 years afterward, it started to come back. So I do think that there is reason for a broader group of patients with smell loss, acquired smell loss, to feel hopeful about this technique. We have not learned everything that we're going to learn about it yet. So I think that it's something that everybody should consider. One of the most frustrating things that I read in the Facebook groups is when people say, smell training, yeah, I'm not ready to do that. I don't think I'm quite ready to start smell training. And that always makes me so sad, because those are the people who really need to use it the most. So I think it's the best way we have of helping ourselves. It's a question of getting motivated to do it and sticking with it.
Yeah.
And when at the beginning, I said, smell training, it can be really easy to explain, or it can take a long time to explain properly. That's what I mean. Teaching people to stay motivated, helping them to understand the pitfalls, how not to get into conversations with yourself while you're smell training, where a little voice in your head is saying something like, this is really boring, or I hate doing this smells really distorted, or I can't smell this at all, why am I bothering? Those kind of negative thoughts are really, will sabotage you, and you really need to find a way to stay motivated. And that's what's so great about the forum, about the website group, is that we're there to encourage each other. And I love it when people come back and say, I'm here to give you an update, and this is what's happening to me. Mm-hmm. And it's good. And this is, this is wonderful. I've also been in groups where, and I don't go into all of them because I find some of them are quite negative, but there's one group where, as soon as someone comes in and says, I've hit my head, or I've had a virus, do you think I should try smell training? There are one or two people in these groups that come in and say, there's no hope, so just forget it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is a terrible thing to do to someone.
Yeah.
Because nobody can know about that person except themselves and their doctor. And smell training is harmless, and everything that we know about it points to it being beneficial. So, it can't hurt.
Yeah.
Just as something else about smell training that's now being researched, and some of the papers are published, other papers are ongoing, but that is the use of smell training for people who are older and who are losing their sense of smell in the same way that we lose our vision and we need reading glasses later in life. There's also a study about neurodegenerative disease and the use of smell training. So it is a very powerful tool. When my doctor told me to smell train, I thought, that's ridiculous. I can't smell anything, and he's telling me that the therapy is to smell something.
Right.
I understand that it's nonsensical, and yet there's something about it.
Well, that's exciting that you even had a doctor that was aware of smell training.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't even have doctors who know what anosmia is.
I know.
Even some ear, nose, and throat doctors don't really have a familiarity with it, I've found.
That is absolutely correct. And I also see kind of what I do as being educational for doctors. I do have doctors that come into the website and take a look.
That's good.
And leave me messages. So I think that I'm reaching quite a broad audience.
That's awesome. And when you were just talking a little while ago about the smell training and the negativity in your head, that's my personal battle. I can't tell you how many times I've started it, and I just generally end up putting it away.
Right.
Because it doesn't work, or I have that perception that it's not working. Yep. So it's nice to talk with you to know that I should keep trying.
Yep. Here's another really interesting thing, and this happened to me as well. I noticed, first of all, we have, it's very difficult for us to assess our own sense of smell. So people will way misjudge their sense of smell. Either they will underestimate it or they will overestimate it. So on both ends of the spectrum. Now, there was a time when I was smell training hard, and I thought to myself, I'm smell training. I guess I'm getting better, but I certainly don't feel like my sense of smell is any better. In other words, and thinking in retrospect, what I saw happening was that my sense of smell was improving, but my well-being, the level of my well-being was still poor. In other words, I felt like my experience of smell was still very poor. And this is what I notice when people come to me in person for consultation. I had one memorable case of a man who wrote me in advance and said, "Oh, I'm just so desperate. I can't smell or taste anything. I literally can smell nothing. So, I want to come to you." And I was thinking, well, if you literally can't smell anything, we might be in trouble. But I said, please download the self-assessment form, fill it out, and bring it with you.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's a self-assessment form on my website. So he comes on the day, and I said, did you bring your self-assessment form? He said, oh, well, I didn't bother because I know I can't smell anything. Or he said, I can't smell or taste anything. I said, okay, well then let's start with the taste test. And I explained to him the difference between smell and taste. And I had 4 little glasses of clear liquid, and I asked him to taste each one. So one was sugar water, one was water with salt in it, one was water with a bit of white vinegar in it, and so on. And so he could perceive the true taste of those different samples of water, flavored water. And I said, okay, so the good news is that your sense of taste, your sense of gustation, that's what you taste on your tongue, is good. It's healthy. So let's not worry about taste anymore. What we've got now is a problem with your sense of smell. So then I had my library of smells there, and we went through. He could experience a smell from an astonishing 70% of the bottles that I had on the table.
Wow.
And he could identify 30%. Now, if we take that man who, when he walked in the door, he said, I can't smell or taste anything, and then I've demonstrated to him that he actually could, he was amazed. He said, well, yeah, I guess I can smell that. So there's this lag between what we think we can smell and what we can actually smell. And very often what I'm asking people to think about and to experience is a way for them to bring those two things together. And that's a very important part of what I do. Now, getting back to what I was saying about my observations of myself, I found that I was able to smell things more than I had been previously, but I felt like my quality of life was lagging behind.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't know enough about the neuroscience of it, but I think that it takes the brain a little bit of time to catch up with the actual ability. I want to say something about your comment about your internal struggle, this idea, this negative conversation that you get involved with in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I have taken plenty of meditation classes, and I took one actually shortly after I lost my sense of smell because I was looking for ways to kind of de-stress. And what I quickly noticed was that in meditation, you're kind of you're up against the same problem of having negative thoughts or having thoughts that distract you from what you're trying to do.
Uh-huh.
We know that meditation induces changes in the brain. So this is neuroplasticity at work. And they think that neuroplasticity is what's behind the usefulness of smell training. So in my own mind, in thinking about smell training and in thinking about meditation, I think the two things have a lot in common. What you're trying to do with a mindfulness exercise is to bring your attention to your physical perception at that moment. That's the mindfulness thing. That's where you are where you are, and you're experiencing what's around you. Well, with smell training, I'm asking you to be where you are and turn off everything else and just think about the experience that you're having with your nose, whatever that is, and to be accepting of whatever that experience is. And it's very, very similar to mindfulness meditation. So if I had a word of advice to give you on how to get out of that rut, it would be to maybe take a mindfulness course and think about how they recommend that you keep your mind trained on what you're doing and to gently keep returning it to the matter at hand, which for smell training is to just gently come back to what your experience is with the smell. And you want to, rather than going into the smell training by thinking to yourself, why can't I smell lemon? Why doesn't this smell like lemon? Rather, take a short sniff in and think and let the smell come to you in whatever form it is and be accepting of that.
I think that's really good advice because it is meditation is really useful for that. Come back to the present and ignore those negative thoughts.
Yeah. I think, and on a cellular level, the way I understand it, is that the stimulation of the sense of smell is what encourages the olfactory nerve to regenerate. And I wouldn't, it would be above my pay grade to speak about it in greater detail than that. I mean, you really need sort of a cell biologist to explain it, but that appears to be what's happening.
That's awesome. So you're actually going to be at the Identifying Treatments for Taste and Smell Disorders conference that the Monell Center and I think it's the University of Florida are presenting in November in Philadelphia. So what will you be covering there, and how can people who are attending the conference sign up for your session?
Well, I'd recommend that anyone that's interested in this conference go onto the ITTSD 2018.org website and register their interest. I believe you have to book a ticket. I think that's important. I'm not sure you can just show up, but I would recommend that you go onto the website and take a look. I will be there one afternoon hosting a segment on patients' experience, and I'll be talking a little bit about the website and the Facebook forum.
That's awesome. So do participants need to sign up, or can they just go to your session?
Yes. No, I think they have to sign up.
Okay. And that's the ITTSD.org or 2018.
No, that's right. ITTSD 2018.org.
Awesome. All right. So my final question for you, how can people find you on your social media?
I am at the website, again, is smelltraining.co.uk. You can also find me on Facebook by going to groups, and the name of the group is Smell Training, just as easy as that.
Yeah.
I also have a public page, which you can find again by going to the browser bar and putting in Smell Training. I'm on Twitter at Smell Training. And that's pretty much it. You can contact me through the smelltraining.co.uk website contact page, but the website has got lots and lots of information on it. If you go to the blog, there are a number of articles. There are over 20 covering everything from how to use nose drops to question and answer interviews with key opinion leaders in the field. So there's lots and lots of information to explore there on the website. And a lot of times people just write to me on the contact page and say, "What smell training? How do I do it?" And then I because I get literally hundreds of people writing to me, I always say, please take a look at the blog first and look at the downloads, and then come back to me if you've got further questions. But yes, I have a lot of traffic on the page, and I'm always surprised at how many different countries people have come from. People have found me from all over the world. So it's great to know that the message about smell training is getting out there.
I really enjoy your website because it is just visually pleasing to look at, but it also has
thank you.
a lot of really useful information.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. And I hope to meet you in November.
Good, Katie. And I'm hoping that, I'd love to chat with you when we meet, at Manel, and, maybe we could interview or you could interview some of the patients who come on that day. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. I think
because
that
the
would be
more
great.
stories that get told, the better it is for everybody. No one doctor is going to have the answer for us, but together as a group of patients, our collective stories are meaningful and can inform further research. So I encourage everyone to get involved.
Yes, me too. Well, thank you so much again, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
You're welcome. Thanks a lot, Katie.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to Chris for agreeing to be interviewed for the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about her and her work, please visit www.smelltraining.co.uk. You can follow her on Twitter @smelltraining and find the Smell Training group on Facebook. I'm a member myself and I enjoy interacting with everyone on there, especially just reading how things are going for people. So thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out the Identifying Treatments for Taste and Smell Disorders conference website, and hopefully we can all meet each other at the conference in November if you can attend. As a reminder, you do need to register ahead of time, but the conference is free. If you can only attend one day, plan to go on Thursday because that day is specifically tailored to patients. I'll make sure to include the link in the episode description. As a reminder, if you have a story you'd like to share, or if you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, like Chris, please email me at thesmellpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, have a great day. Hey, thanks for listening to the Smell Podcast on YouTube. Make sure that you connect with the podcast on social media. You can find me online at thesmellpodcast.com or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Smell Podcast. Can't wait to see you there.